Welcome to Northwest School of Fly Fishing, Virtual Fly Fishing Academy. Today we're going to talk about fly fishing knots. We're going to talk about 6 knots. And knots are really critical to fly fishing because it's the weakest part of the leader. We can lose a hooked fish for many different reasons. We can break the fly off in the fish. We can have the fly come off the fish. We can lightly hook it. He can shake it. He can do a number of things to lose a fish, but we never want to lose a fish because of a bad knot. So we're going to talk about 6 knots today. 3 of them will be pertaining to actually tying on the fly. And I'm doing this for a reason because I want you to choose what will work best for you, and I'll talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of each knot. The other 3 knots will be the perfection loop, the surgeon's knot, and the spring knot. So the first knot I want to teach you is called the clinch knot, and by far it's used by most anglers. Probably in the high 80 to 90% of most fly anglers use a clinch knot, and I'm always astounded by that because of all the fly fishing knots out there. The clinch knot is the only knot that I know that fails on a regular basis. What I mean by fail, it will actually come untied. In the fly fishing circles, we call that a pigtail, like the tail of a pig. It gets all coiled up at the end. When you see that at the end of your fly leader, you know that you've lost a fish because your knot has failed or you didn't tie it correctly. But we're going to teach you how to tie a clinch knot. There are applications for a clinch knot. Some people just love the clinch knot because it's easy to tie, and they have various reasons why they like it. What I'm going to do is just show you the quickest, easiest way. We just take the end of our leader and we want to run it through our hook. It's going to come through like that. We want to use at least 12 inches, 8 to 12 inches, and all we're doing is creating a loop right here. We take the tag in right here and we're going to wrap it around our leader 5 times. And then what we've created is this little tiny hole right here by the hook. We're going to take our tag in and we're going to stick it right through there. We're going to grab that tag in and pull it tight, and that is a clinch knot. Now, if we want to, what we call improve the clinch knot, we can take it one step further. We can take the tag in right here and run it back through that loop that we created, and that's what it would be a locking system. We're going to take that tag in, it's going to go right back through that loop, and that's going to what we call lock it in there, or what we call improving it, and that is your clinch knot. And the characteristics of a clinch knot, it looks like a hangsman's knot, like we're hanging somebody. And you'll have various loops going all the way up, anywhere from 5 to 7 loops coming up your leader. That's what causes that pigtail if and when the knot fails. The second knot I want to teach you is called depending on what part of the country you're from. If you're from the West Coast, the East Coast, it's called a fisherman's knot. If you're from Idaho, we call it the 16 penny knot. I think they call it the 1620 in Alaska. I know the guides love to tie this knot. And it's called a 16 penny, and it's easy to tie. It's actually easier to tie than the clinch knot. And the beautiful thing about this knot is it never fails. It will not untie. The 16 penny knot, it starts the same way all knots do, right through the eye, and that's going to come back and create, what we're going to do is create a second loop like that. And then we're going to take that second loop and we're going to pinch it with our left hand, creating this loop here, and that's the loop we're going to tie with. So as I bring that through the eye of the hook, I come back around and create that second loop. I let my left hand pinch it because my right hand's going to tie it. And I go around the leader 2 to 3 times, ending up with that loop on one end and the tag in on the other. I can let go of the fly, and then I'm going to take that tag in right through that loop, bring it down to its tight, and slide it down into a controlled knot. And you're going to have a little 90-degree here. That's called a 16 penny knot. We must use saliva in all our fly fishing knots in order to create a lubricant so that this monofilament or carbon fiber, fluorocarbon, makes it easier for these knots to slide into place, and it also lowers the heat that we generate when we pull knots tight. If we have a lot of heat that we're generating by pulling these real tight, it'll actually weaken the knot, and we don't want the knot to break because we didn't lubricate our knot. So that's 2 knots. The third knot I want to show you is called a turtle knot, and it's a very, very old knot. It's probably the oldest knot that I've been tying. And a turtle knot is really an important knot. We use a turtle knot a lot for size 16s, 18s, and 20s small flies because the characteristics of a clinch knot or a fisherman's knot has a lot of loops coming up on the fly. And sometimes the actual knot will be as big or half the size of the original fly that you're trying to tie on. What a turtle knot does is it has 2 characteristics. It will not break, it will not fail, and it's easy to learn. If you learn correctly, if you're watching a lot of videos or a lot of printed materials, it can confuse you. And there's probably 4 or 5 ways to tie a turtle knot. And they can be very, very complicated or very simple. I will show you the simplest form to do that. To start a turtle knot, we just thread the hook on our leader and slide the fly down. Now the fly is somewhere on our leader, and now we're going to tie the turtle knot. A turtle knot is a slip knot. We start by tying a slip knot. We make a loop. We go through that loop. We grab the tag in, and it forms a loop, i.e. a slip knot. Form that loop, go through the loop, grab the tag in, and we form a loop. Now the turtle knot is done. It's a really easy knot, very simple. All you got to learn how to do is tie a slip knot. Most people can do that. At this point, we have to finish the knot. We have to take the fly that we put on our leader, and we have to take it and put it through the loop or the slip knot that we created. We put it through that loop. With our left hand, we grab the leader and the tag in together, like that. And we pull that knot tight all the way to the fly. What that creates is only 1 loop right there. And the harder that you pull on a turtle knot, the tighter the knot gets. This knot will not fail. Like all knots, it'll break, but it will not fail. So there's 3 knots I've just given you to use to tying on a fly. In my opinion, each knot has an application. There are uses for each knot. I still use a clinch knot from time to time. However, I want to tell you for sure that you're going to choose one of these knots and make it your primary knot. The 4th knot I want to teach you is what we call a surgeon's knot. And a surgeon's knot is used to connect 2 pieces of monofilament together. So if this yellow cord here would be the end of my leader, I need to add tippet to it. I might have an 8-foot leader, and that's too short for me. I want to add another 3 feet on. I have to add that to my end of the leader, and we have to connect these 2 pieces of monofilament together. And what we do is we use a surgeon's knot to do that. Now, a surgeon's knot is really, really simple to tie. Everybody ties an overhand knot. Anybody can tie an overhand knot. There's an overhand knot. It's really simple to tie. That's the first knot children learn how to tie, is a overhand knot like that. What a surgeon's knot basically is an overhand knot. But what we want to do is put the 2 knots or 2 lines together like that. So this is the end of my leader. This is my tippet. I want to add the 2 together. We put them in line. We take right in the middle there, we take it and we pinch it, and we just make a little under loop so that we can tie our overhand knot. The difference is we're tying an overhand knot with 2 pieces of material instead of 1. Now to finish that knot, we just go 1 more time. When we got to this point right here, add a little saliva to cool and lubricate that knot, pull it tight. You want to cut each tag in off about a 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch, and you're ready to add tippet to your material. You will find that to be an easy knot to tie, and it's certainly as effective as a blood knot. A lot of anglers will try to perfect a blood knot, and all they do is struggle, especially when you're in a river condition where there's wind and you're cold or whatever it may be. A blood knot can be hard to tie. A surgeon's knot we've been tying basically since we're children, learning how to tie our shoes. The fifth knot I want to teach you is called a spring knot. Spring knot is what we use to tie around the bend of the hook to add another fly to it. And we call it a spring knot because we use our finger here as a spring. To tie this knot properly, you have to have your hand in a fist so the finger is pointing out. This is really important because that spring will hold open the clinch knot. So it's called a spring knot. However, we're tying a clinch knot. We take the monofilament, we put it on our spring. We reach down here about 1.5 inches below the finger, and we wrap that, or what we call helicopter that, 7 times. With our snap fingers, we pinch it, and the knot's tied. We use that spring right here to hold open that area there so we can keep or finish our clinch knot. So the tag end, what the tag end does, the tag end goes through that little loop that we created, and then the tag end is then pulled straight down with the leader into a knot, using the spring to hold it open. With our snap fingers again, we hold that knot. Now the knot is tied. We now want to transfer that knot onto the bend of the hook, and we do that by pulling the knot off the fly in the direction that my finger is pointing. So I'm transferring this knot to this hook by pulling it off like that. We slide down until the tag end releases and then pull tight. And that will add your dropper now. The dropper will be right within where you want it. And now we're fishing a lead fly and a dropper, 2 nymphs together, a dry fly and an emerger. You're fishing what we call flies in tandem. So we'll run that by one more time. I'll kind of do it in real time this time. Make a fist, a finger, that's our spring. We put our tippet material or our nylon on there, and we grab it at 1.5 inches. We helicopter it 6 times. With our snap fingers, we hold it together. To finish the knot, we take the tag in. It goes through the opening that we created with our spring. We take the tag in and the leader. We pull them down together into a knot. We pinch the knot. We take the fly that we want to add it to, and we transfer that via the direction that our finger's pointing. We pull it off. We slide it down until the tag end releases, and we pull tight, and we're ready to tie our dropper fly on. The final fly, the final knot that we want to learn is what we call a perfection loop. We want to use loops in a lot of applications in fly fishing. A lot of new anglers will come to me and they'll say, what do I need to learn a loop for? Well, today's modern leaders and fly lines all come with loops, and it's pretty much common today in fly fishing that we do a lot of loop-to-loop connections. If you're nymph fishing, we do a lot of what we call reconnects and connects or soft knots used with a loop-to-loop. Now, how we tie that is we simply take a piece of leader material or tippet, and we create an underloop again with 12-inch tag. With the tag in now, we're going to go all the way around that loop, just like that, and we're going to pinch that loop in the same pinch we have the first loop in. It looks like a little butterfly. Now, to finish the knot, we're going to take the body of the butterfly, we're going to take it between the 2 wings and hold it down with our middle finger. Now, we're going to reach through the first loop, grab the second loop, and pull it through, forming our perfection loop. I'll do that one more time for you. To tie a perfection loop, we're going to go an under loop, just like that. With our tag in, we're going to go all the way around to the back end of that first loop, and we're going to pinch it right with our other finger, and it forms a butterfly. The tail or the body of the butterfly goes between the two wings and is held down by our middle finger. Loop 1, loop 2, we go through loop 1 and grab loop 2 and pull it through into a perfection loop. A loop knot, it can be used to tie two pieces of monofilament together. For example, I'll do a quick perfection loop, and I can tie a perfection loop over here. And then we can take the two and put them together. I can take the tag in through that loop, and we can take two pieces of monofilament and bring them together, forming what we call a soft knot. See, that's a soft knot, it's loose. What's the benefit of that? I can take it off if I don't want it. I can just take that knot off. It's that simple. That's the only way that you can tie two pieces of monofilament together where you can take them apart. And why would you want to do that? Well, if you're adding a leader to your fly line, if you're adding, another good example is I want to attach to my line, I want to add a tag or a dropper to another system that I have. I can take a loop, I can put it through there like that, I can pull that loop tight, and then slide it down. Get the tag in out of there. Now I have that loop attached to that line. I've created a T, and I can slide that down to another knot if I want to, and move that fly up and down however I want to. We can create our own leaders. You can build your own leaders. Your whole leader system that you want to build is based on loops. So loops are becoming a very, very important part of fly fishing, and I think we're going to see more and more applications for loops as years go on. Well, there you have it. These are the 6 basic knots in fly fishing. Learn to perfect these knots. You've got a choice on 3 different knots to use on tying a knot. You have a good knot to learn on connecting 2 pieces of monofilament together. You can add now 2 flies or multiple flies to your fishing with a spring knot. And last but not least, you have a loop knot. Tie those knots, lubricate them, and use them, and practice until you get them done right. It's one thing to tie these knots in a classroom full of cordage and big hooks. It's another thing to see how these knots are tied on the river in river conditions with small diameter tippet, and working those fingers and tying those knots the way that you would be doing it on the river. Our first knot is the clinch knot, and you want to get yourself a little comfortable here. You want to be tying these flies on with both hands available to you. I always tuck my rod right at the cork grip, right under my arm. That gives me a firm grip on my fly rod, but allows me to use both hands. The second thing I do is I will take this fly right here and I will hold on to it. Pretty good grip on that. And the next thing is we want to put the tippet material through the eye of the hook. However, tippet is a round diameter, and if you put something round in a round hole, it can clog up. So what we really want to do, we want to take your tippet, we'll cut it at an angle, and that's going to give us a nice point to go through the eye of the fly. Stick that through the eye of the fly, like that, and you have the start of your clinch knot. Well, now what I like to do is I like to have the leader material in my hand so I can hold it. I've got the fly between my pinch and the finger. Now it allows me to grab that line and wrap it 6 times, 5 to 6 times, however you like. And then we simply take the end of the tippet material right through that loop that you created, grabbing it with our left hand, pulling it tight. I'm going to have to lick this, use some saliva, and pull that tight. Lock that knot down. Now, a lot of people don't do that, but you really want if you watch me, I wrap that line around my hand and I really lock that knot down tight. Now this is a knot that likes to fail. It'll come untied. Now what we do is we just leave about 1/16 of an inch off for stretch. And there you have the clinch knot. Okay, next knot. The 16 penny starts off with most fly knots is that we have to, of course, put that thread through, or the tippet through the eye of the hook. This is where we differ from the clinch knot, is we're actually coming back and making another loop. Do you see how I did that? I came through here with my finger, I made another loop, came back, and took all 3 pieces of material in my right hand. Now with my left hand, I hold them all together, and there's that loop sticking out. Now holding the tippet material in my palm of my hand, I can now wrap that 2 to 3 times around the leader. Just like that. Now with the tag end being right here, all I have to do is release the fly, put the tag end through the loop, grab the tag end, pull that knot to a tight, put some saliva on it and pull it tight, and that's your 16 penny knot. A very easy knot to tie, and remember, the advantage of this knot is it will not untie. Again, we clip it off at about 1/16 of an inch to 1/8. The next knot is a turle knot, T-U-R-L-E, turle knot. And this is a knot that we use. Remember, we use this knot for small flies where we don't want a big, huge knot, but we want a knot that won't slip, won't fail, and just get real tight. So the knot itself won't get bigger than the fly. We start out all knots. So this one's a little different. We're going to thread this one on like that, and we're just going to put it on. And then down at the very end, we're going to tie a simple, very simple slip knot. Just like that. There's that slip knot. The knot's pretty much tied. Then we take the fly, which we already have on the leader, right here, and it goes right through that loop. A lot of guys will do this. They'll actually put their fingers in the loop. Hand the fly off to their fingers, and then with your left hand you take the tag end and the leader and pull that through that loop, creating a knot on the outside, and that'll just slide right up into a turle knot. There you have it. You can trim off the excess and you're in business. Again, turle knots are used for small flies, 16s, sometimes 16s, all the time on 18s and 20s and 22s. It's going to give you that one wrap around the eye, and the harder you pull on this fly, the tighter it's going to get. The next knot we want to do is we want to do what we call a spring knot. A spring knot is when we tie around the bend of the hook, right here, another piece of tippet material. And we use this piece of tippet material to tie on a dropper fly, another nymph, an emerger, or whatever. But we need to add a piece of tippet from the bend of the hook to the dropper fly. And how we do that is very simple. We simply take the fly that we already have tied on and we just hang it up on our guide, like that. It's out of the way. Then we come over and grab some tippet material. And I always like to use more tippet material than I need. It's better to err on too much than not enough. And we completely cut that free. Now I have probably about a 2.5 foot piece of tippet material right here. And this is what the spring knot we're going to tie around the bend of the hook. So first thing we want to do is create that spring. Now on that spring we're going to put the tippet material we want. It looks like that. We're going to pinch that right at about 1.5 inches, and we're going to turn that 7 times. Just like that, 7 times. With our snap fingers we're going to hold that knot. Now it can be blowing windy, it can be doing, nothing's going to hurt that knot. Now we're going to complete the clinch knot by taking the tag end, putting it through that hole you created, bringing it down into a knot. There it is. The knot's tied. Now we just have to transfer it onto the hook. At this point, what we do is we take the fly off our guide and we transfer that spring knot or clinch knot right onto the bend of the hook, simply taking it like that, sliding your hand all the way down until the tag end releases, and it slides all the way up to the bend of the hook. At that point, we trim and start tying on our other fly. That's the spring knot. Very versatile knot. If you're a 2-fly fisherman or 3-fly fisherman, then this is a knot that you're going to be using. It's easy to tie. You can tie it in any kind of weather or any kind of wind. Next knot. Okay, this next knot is called a surgeon's knot, and we use surgeon's knot if I find that my leader is too short and I want to add to it. We always want long leaders in fly fishing. We don't like short leaders. Short leaders create drag, and drag is the artificial movement of your fly caused by current on your fly line. And we can eliminate drag. We can eliminate drag by using long leaders, or at least we can control drag by using long leaders. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this fly off. I'm going to put this fly somewhere where I can get to it, and in this case I'll put it right on a cork. And now I have, at the end of my leader, nothing. So I'm going to add to that to extend that out. So taking off the leader material that I need to do that, say I take off what I need, and now I have 2 pieces of monofilament or fluorocarbon. I got the leader in my right hand and the tippet that I want to add onto it in my left hand. So what we're going to do now is that kind of like that overhand knot, but in order to do that we have to have these 2 pieces in line like that. And then we take them in line right about in the middle and we create that loop just like that. Now all we have to do is take our leader material back through that loop. Let's do it this way. There's that loop. We're going to come back through there. We're going to come underneath and pull that through. That's going to give us that first overhand knot that you use to tie your shoes. Then we're going to do it one more time. And that's going to create that nice surgeon's knot. Now we've added tippet material to our leader. We've extended our leader and we're ready to fly fish some more. We simply take the tag ends and we clip them, and we clip the other one, and we've now extended our leader. The final knot is the progressive loop. We always need loops in fly fishing for one thing or another, and all we do is take a piece of monofilament like this. We use everything today and in the future in fly fishing is going to be loop to loop and making these loops and adding things on. So how we do that is we just take a piece of monofilament and we create that underloop that I talked about. And from there, remember, we're going to take this underloop. We're going to want at least about 12 inches of tag in. We make that loop, and then we're going to go all the way around that loop and pinch it. And there's our butterfly right there. The 2 wings and the tail. I'm going to take the tail, it's going to go between the 2 wings. I'm just going to hold that firmly with my middle finger there. Now I got loop 1 and loop 2. The loop 1 is the first loop I made, loop 2 is the second loop I made. I'm going to go through the first loop, I'm going to grab the second loop and pull the second loop through the first loop, creating a perfection loop. We're all done. There it is, perfection loop. We're ready to move on. Now these are the 6 essential knots that we need to perfect in fly fishing. The first 3 are for tying on a fly, and I leave that up to I give you a choice of the 3 to use. Each one has a defined purpose. The other 3, the spring knot, the perfection loop and the surgeon's knot, those are all critical knots. They're the base of the knot system, and you can do anything with those knots. Now remember that the strength of the leader is dependent upon the knot that you tie. And the strength of that knot on your fly can determine or at least lower the odds of you missing that fish. So in the future, when you're on the river and you're having trouble tying knots, okay, refer back to what I've told you in terms of keeping these tag ends correctly. Every single knot that you've learned is easy to tie. They're not difficult if you just take your time and learn them the correct way.